All right, you are listening to Dumpster Diving with
Janice for the fourth time.
and Jane. But that's okay because we've been having a lot of fun with Dina and Dylan, and now Bruce, our uncle, our UB, Uncle Bruce is on the line with us too. We're super excited.
Oh my gosh.
We're gonna have like a little powwow of the Doxies today, which
Little
we're
family reunions. I think we said Springer style, Jerry Springer style, just because we can aspire, right? We can
Bruce is
aspire. But
down for that. He
you
is.
guys, if you've
But
been
no
listening
hitting.
to us, this is one of the missing pieces. One of the missing pieces is yet another Doxy brother to our biological father, Kurt. And so, Bruce, thank you so much. It's wonderful to meet you. I get to meet you for the first time. Everybody else here, of course, knows you well. So
I,
great.
I watch your I watch your postings, and I think you're terrific. They're
Oh,
great.
thank you for saying that. You're so kind. Thank you for that. I
I-
appreciate
Is
that.
is Kim online?
No, we missed him. We're not sure. We're not sure if he had indicated he was going to join us, but we haven't heard from him. So yeah, I don't have a way to like get a hold of him outside the messenger string.
Yeah.
Um, so if not today, then you know what? We'll come back another time with just the Doxy brothers. We love that idea
Yeah.
too. Yeah.
Okay.
He gave us Bruce, when Kim was on, he gave us such a great perspective, right, on the Doxy family, and especially, the brothers, and especially, of course, our father. And so we've spent lots of time with Dylan and Dina. We kind of know the intricate story that led to, the connection with you and Dina last year. And so we have
Yeah.
all the pieces. So really, I think today we're just really hoping that, we can hear a little bit about your story, right? No, whatever it is that you want to share, whether it was growing up as a doxy, whether it was, some different points in history with the family or the brothers or what have you. Like, we're just interested in understanding as much as possible through the stories of all the folks at the table. So Dina and Dylan are sticking with us because of course they are such an important part of your story. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of what we're hoping for, man.
So how many people have we got on this group right now?
Just five of us. So it's you, Dina, Dylan, myself, of course, and then Jane.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm just on mute
Well,
because I have a little conure that likes to scream her head off, so I'm intermittent. Uncle Bruce knows what that's like. He's grew up with birds too. So
Ah,
yeah, that's right. That's right.
Good
And we
morning,
always had
Papa.
hello, how you doing, baby?
I'm good. I'm happy to see you.
Happy to see you too. So I guess when I grew up, uh, finally I had three brothers, and so the four of us, no sisters, and until later when after I had long left home, and Sabrina was adopted by my mom in Hawaii, and so I didn't know Sabrina until she was like 12 or something, I guess. And anyway, my brothers and I, we always seemed to be teamed up. Kim and I were like a team. We got along pretty well. I got along well with Jan. I never got along with Kurt because he was a little over assertive.
he's a Leo. Leave him alone.
Yeah, and you're right. But he would team up with Kurt would team up with one of us, and that would last for a little while, and then something would happen, and sides would shift,
ah,
So,
Sounds
but
about right.
I always felt like I had to protect myself from Kurt because
mm,
he was offensive to me, and
yeah.
so so it was sort of a combative growing up, and that was accentuated by Dad being in the Marine Corps and moving us around
Yeah.
constantly, and I ended up going to 13 schools before I graduated from high school.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot of moving around. And some places I was there for more than a year, and some places it was like I think it was when I was in the 6th grade. I went to 3 different schools,
Ooh,
and
that's
hard
hard.
to hard to adjust. Yeah, we had a lot of fun. We did a lot of pretty cool things, and like living at Paris Island. That's
Oh,
when I
wow.
that's when I was in high school, and we lived on the base. And so I was very much connected with my friends and people outside the family unit,
Yeah.
and that was really wild down there. And but we had boats at our disposal, and we had a shrimp net that we would capture shrimp, and all the waterways around there were just fascinating to me.
Yeah.
And then the the culture, it was so odd. Of course, that was hardcore slave area there in the old times, but a lot of the black people, when they were freed, migrated out into the islands.
Mhm.
And the islands down at that particular area, they were islands at low tide and swamp at high tide,
Yeah.
and but they staked out high ground spots out there in the islands, and they maintained their own dialect, uh, which is Gullah, and
Allah.
Gullah, like Gullah, Gullah, and so I couldn't speak Gullah, so when I'd go out to the islands, I didn't often succeed in chatting with just anybody I came across, and of course they were still intimidated around white people, and
Yeah.
so they were not assertive about creating communication, and so at one point, one of my friends in high school, his father was a plantation owner, and they grew a lot of different crops, and it wasn't much different from slave days. I'll tell you, the the black people did all the work, and the white people sat around and drank and smoked
Mm.
and and made jokes and
Yeah.
shot at things and whatever. So where was I going? Oh, and the Gullah people were also heavily into voodoo, and uh, they would use that against each other in settling disputes and so forth. And there was a witch doctor in Charleston whose name was Dr. Buzzard, and Dr. Buzzard had been around for many decades, and he was a powerful force in all up and down the coast amongst the voodoo people. And the sheriff, the local sheriff, I don't remember where the county lines were and all that, but he was a formidable character, and he had learned to speak Gullah, and he, after a few years as sheriff, became a witch doctor, and
Wow.
because it was the only way he could get the people to communicate with him.
Mm.
And so if somebody has a dispute and they want to settle it through witchcraft, they would take a root, a certain kind of root,
Mhm.
and dig it up and clean it up, and then they decorate it and do incantations over it, and then they would bury it on your property.
Oh, wow.
And then when that happened, your kids would get sick, your animals would get sick, everything went bad, and your crops would fail. And so they call on the sheriff and the sheriff would come out and bring his dogs and his people, and
Oh my
they would do ceremony and
Yeah.
they would dig up they would find the root and dig it up, and then he would do, I don't know, whatever he did to diffuse the power of the root, and then he would sling it out into the water,
Wow.
and it worked. It worked for them,
Yeah.
and so it was. Anyway, the point of the story was it was a very interesting
Place to live.
few
Life.
years.
Jeez.
Yeah,
Wow.
How long did you live at Parris Island, Bruce?
3 years. That was
So was
as
that the
long as
longest?
that was as long as I lived anywhere.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. So
That's amazing.
yeah, so 1960 to 63. That's when I
Okay.
was there.
So did you
And
graduate high school from there, or you went someplace else to finish up high school?
I went to high school there.
Yeah,
That's where I
that's what it
did
sounds
most
like.
of my high school, right there.
Yeah.
And also interesting point was in South Carolina at that time, if you had a driver's license, you could apply for a school bus driver's license,
Oh,
which I did, and I got a job driving a school bus while I was in school.
oh my gosh.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
it was pretty. It
That
was
is.
pretty interesting. I got a lot of schedule alterations and so forth because of that. Because
Talk
of the job.
about a different time. That
Yeah.
Did any of the kids challenge you, tell you to shut up because they were older than you, or?
No, I was a pretty tough kid back then.
Sounds like
And,
it.
there were bigger, tougher guys, but they weren't interested in hassling me.
Oh my gosh, that's too funny.
Yeah,
So
and
Bruce,
also
oh, go ahead.
I was a car guy. I'd spent my life reading about cars and car related stuff,
Love it.
and from living in California for a few years, I had gotten immersed in the car culture, and then we went back east to Virginia, and we were there for a fairly short time, but I also got some hands-on car experience there. And then when I moved to South Carolina, there were a lot of kids who drove cars to school, and a lot of them were pretty junky cars.
Mm.
And so it was like the beginning of Le Mans at the closing bell of school, people migrating very quickly to the parking
How
lots,
funny.
getting
Yeah.
their cars and get the hell out of there.
Yep.
But inevitably, there would be one or two or three or four cars out there that didn't fire up. And so I would go out there and help them get going.
Nice.
And so I established myself as a car guru, and because I could almost always get them started, unless they had something broken that they had to go buy parts for or whatever.
Right.
And so after that went on for a while, I got acquainted with a few boys whose dads were moonshiners, and moonshiners would spend any money on their cars, and because they had to be really fast, they had to run from the cops.
Of course.
We were only 40 miles from the Georgia border, so if you could go 120 miles an hour for 40 miles, you could shake the cops,
Oh my gosh.
And so they would invite me out to their places in the swamps or in the islands, and they would feed me and entertain me and so forth, and I would go out there and work on their cars, modify their cars, do all these things. And so I was a minor celebrity there for quite a while.
Well, how old were you? Hold on. How old were you? Ish.
16 to 18.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody, hold on for a second. We gotta acknowledge the experience here, right? So as a 16, 17-year-old, you were a bus driver. You were
Yep.
a school guru, and you were a hired talent for the moonshining industry. So I just want to
Yeah.
put that in perspective with our 16-year-olds.
Yeah, and like not to mention, it sounds like he was accepted by the local tribal community.
Yeah,
That's pretty much what happened, and
yeah,
knew other little secrets as well. So,
Right.
it's I swear it has to be a doxy thing because I swear like I even have weird stories about being integrated into people's like little communities and stuff. Like I think it's just in our DNA
yeah,
Maybe so.
to
yeah.
befriend anybody and just like let's go. Let's have a good time, you
Yeah.
know?
And the thing in my head, Jane, is so our youngest daughter, right, is a junior in high school. So she's thinking about next year and applying to colleges and all the things. And so she's lamenting, right, about the fact that nothing terrible has happened to her. So she doesn't have a good college essay story. I'm thinking Bruce
Oh my
might write her
God.
story for her and we'll just
Yes.
insert her name in it and then she'll
Yeah.
boom. That's it. She's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Except for she's gonna have
life
to have
has
a
been
really
too
good
good for
story.
her. So she
Yeah.
doesn't have a good story. So damn,
There you
you
go.
know. So
Bruce,
we're
this could be
apologizing
a
for
good
that.
revenue stream for you. This could be a whole new revenue stream. Writing kids'
Yeah.
essays for
Well,
college.
That's
I
right.
wanted to tell you about the plantation. Um, I wanted to get a summer job, and I mentioned it to my friend whose dad was a plantation owner, and and so he said, "I'll get you a job." So he went and told his dad that I needed a job and what could he do, or where could he put me, and so forth. And so he sent me to work at a tomato packing plant, and there were about 200 or 300 black people who would go out and pick tomatoes and bring them into the plant and package them up. And problem with that was the building was open at the bottom and closed at the top, and they had air conditioning in the upper level. And so all the white people that worked there, which is maybe a dozen, including me, we didn't do anything. I didn't have any assigned work to do. And so I was just up there sitting in this big office space, doing nothing, shooting the bull with people. But I got real bored with that. And so I started going down and talking to the black people. And nobody went down and talked to the black people unless they were giving orders or handing out pay or something like that. And so I had quite a good time with these black people, and they were astonished that a white person was coming down and chatting with them just for the hell of it, And so that also got me like a ticket to ride. I could go out
Yeah.
in the islands and people knew who I was.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a fun thing. And did you ever read, and what the hell is his name? One of my classmates became an established author, and he wrote a book called "The River is Wide," and it was a story about him. He went to college for a couple of years, and then he wanted a teaching job, and so there were no teaching jobs open. But in the out in this island, I forget what the name of the island was. There was a big community of black people out there, and they had a school, and so he became a school teacher, and he tells a lot of great stories in this book about things he did and how he became accepted and so forth, and his interaction with individual kids and so forth, and
Wow.
disputes with a lot of the hierarchy.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to say his name and I can't say it.
That's all right. We can look up the book itself, but it just
Yeah.
seems like obviously that was a really high impact, right, time in your life, and certainly being
Oh
able
yeah.
to kind of spend, like you said, multiple years there versus moving around. if you're okay with it, I would love to shift a little bit, Bruce, because we've heard a lot about a lot of things. And one of the people who keeps surfacing that I'm actually really interested in kind of better understanding who she was as a person is your mom.
Oh,
And
yeah.
some of our grandmothers, because I've heard the perspective of the grandchildren of your mom. And
Right.
I'm just super curious obviously as a woman myself, as a mom and a grandmother myself. And I'm just super curious about like what it was like growing up with your mom and yeah, that's it. Like kind of who she
Well,
was as a
let me tell
from
you
your
a little
perspective.
bit about her.
Yeah.
Her mother was named Catherine, and the grandchildren always called her Nanu. And she had, I think, 6 children. One was stillborn or died in infancy, and but she was a single mother. After those children were born, her husband Appleton Lawrence, he flaked out and went and claimed he had a job offer and disappeared, kind of like Kurt, you know.
Yeah.
Papa, wasn't she the first woman in Washington to get divorced?
I don't know about that.
That's
I
what I
haven't heard
heard.
that story.
Okay.
But anyway, she was a pianist, a concert pianist, and very, very quality music. And so that's how she made her living. That and teaching piano, students would come to her house. And she bought a little house in Arlington, Virginia, and which is where I was born. And she sometimes took in a boarder, rented a room to someone, and anything to make a buck to raise her kids. And she was also quite a character. She was sort of alcoholic, and she smoked King Edward cigars, and
What kind of woman?
they're pretty nasty cigars, let me tell
Yeah.
you. I tried one and it made me sick. The the other thing was Ram's Head Ale, and so sometimes she would get sick, which meant she was on a binge. She was
Right.
drinking for a few days in a row, and but as a child, I would go and visit her, and she would send me up a long block to a local store, and they don't call them bodegas out there in Virginia, but just a little small market liquor store kind of thing. And she'd give me a note, and with the power of the note, I could buy anything at all, anything
Wow.
she wanted. And so that was kind of interesting. But anyway, she had 5 living kids, and every one of which is a story, let me tell you.
I bet.
Mom was Peggy was the youngest, and Peggy was always in theater. Well, all of them were in theater from time to time, because my grandmother was she'd always have them around the piano singing and so forth, but it was all show business oriented. And but boy, that group, I only heard them like 2 times, when they all were all present and they were all singing, and God, they all remembered the different parts that they would sing, and it was sensational.
Wow.
And there used to be a guy with a radio show named Arthur Godfrey. Ever hear of him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, they would sing on his, not all of them, but I think 2 or 3 of them would sing on the Arthur Godfrey show on
Wow.
radio.
That's awesome.
And the house, when she bought it, had no electricity and no plumbing. And so as the kids grew up, Bill, who was the second oldest, I think he was second oldest, maybe, I don't know, I can't remember exactly, but Bill was a guy who developed skills like crazy. He was amazing, and he became a plumber when he was 15 years old or something. And so he plumbed her house. She gave her 2 bathrooms and a real kitchen.
Wow.
And yeah,
Yes.
and then he took up being an electrician, and so he wired the house for it to get light and power into all the rooms. And so he was a pretty wild character. And he and his brother Larry were athletes. They would walk around on their hands and go up and down stairs walking on their hands.
Wow.
And so pretty impressive. But later in life, Bill bought property out in Virginia. He bought a fair amount of acreage, and this was before World War II. And he was a pilot. He became a commercial pilot, and in World War II, he flew big planes back and forth to Europe to drop supplies.
Wow.
And so that was his war. I never heard his war stories actually, but that was his service. And he came back to his house, and he got married and started having children, and he figured that he needed a barn. So he built a barn. He also built his house, which was a little wooden house, but he built this barn, and he couldn't afford the lumber to build a big wooden barn, so he decided to make a block wall barn, and he made his own cinder blocks, 15,000 of them, to build his barn. It still stands today, you know, and they always kept a cow and so forth. But he did a lot of fantastic things, and he was always building something. He was building a big house in the side of the hill, and he there was a stream that went, or a little minor river stream, something that went through his property, and so he dammed it up and made a little lake there, and made a real beautiful bridge that went from one side to the other, because his access to the road was by his little house, his old house, and to drive to the new house, which he had to do to carry building materials, a lot of stone and cinder block and so forth. And so it was turning into a really ritzy kind of property out there.
Wow.
And it was located right next to the Manassas Battlefield Park.
Oh yeah.
And so he found in his little river, he found a perfectly preserved musket, or no, it was a cap and ball rifle, I guess. Whatever it was, he found it in the mud in the bottom of the stream.
Yeah.
And which led him into making his own guns, and collecting guns. And by the time he died at, I don't know, 95 or whatever he was, he had an amazing collection of guns. And by that time he had moved up to Washington. What?
So so first off, your depth of like detail is amazing to me. And I feel like, Jane, obviously there are like many episodes to come in terms of like the different people and the potential of the stories, Bruce, that you're kind of bringing to the table with them. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking about, so then, and we have about 20 more minutes or so in terms of like the length of this episode.
Mm.
So I'm wondering if we can, like, I love that you told us now about your grandmother. So some of our like great grandmother, and then you got to your mom and her siblings. And I think we're
Right.
hearing about one of her brothers right now. So can we
I
shift to your
wanted to
mom?
tell you about my mom, but
Yeah,
I had to
yeah.
tell you about her siblings
Oh,
to
I
put
understand
everything in
that.
perspective.
I know, I know, I know. So I think we, like I said, we probably have many times to come back to hear about
We
all
can
the
always
different
have the
people.
UUB University, so University of Uncle Bruce, and we can have
I
like
love it. Yes, yes. So, but honestly, I'm going to be really selfish, and I love on one hand, I don't want to sacrifice the context that you're setting for us. On the other hand, I'm really just like, I would love to hear a little bit more about your mom, and then we can come back to all the siblings if that's okay. Just because,
Sure.
I would love to hear your perspective on her.
Well, she was a little timid when she was a girl, and but she was a pretty girl, and um, they all lived in my grandmother's house, and um, they went to school and so forth in a normal way. And I'm sure there's a lot of content that I never heard there, but and then Peggy, her younger sister, was the baby doll. She was really pretty, and she was like privileged character for some reason. And so she grew up there, and losing my voice. What was I getting to? Oh, she was a performer because of my grandmother,
Right.
and she was a singer dancer kind of girl, and when she finished school, she became a professional dancer, and this is like the tail end of the what do you call the age of people in theater making short movies and performing on stage.
Okay.
And there's a word for it. But she had a partner which she was not involved with other than being a dance partner.
Yeah.
And she was involved in theater in Washington, D.C. And I think that's where she met my dad. I believe she met Bob Rawlings when she was still in school.
Okay.
They
And
went to school together.
right, she was very enamored of Bob, and Bob was enamored of all the pretty girls. And it's true. And I loved Bob. Everybody did. But he was a bit of a scoundrel, and a very cool individual. Always had nice clothes, and looked great all the time. And where was I going? Oh, so then my dad was a Marine, and he was stationed at the what they call the Marine barracks in Washington, D.C. And they were the guys who did all the ceremonial work where the Marines needed to be represented in Washington, D.C. and Arlington Cemetery. And so he's usually wearing his dress blues and looking good. And I think my mom kind of fell for him right then and there.
Hard to
And
resist a man in uniform, Bruce. We all know that.
yeah, so he asked my mom to marry him, and he was a pretty talented guy also. And, but he impressed her and they got married. And my mom told me much later on that if Bob Rawlings had asked her first, she would have married him.
Oh man.
Funny.
Yeah.
This is the Jerry Springer part, people. This is it
Yes.
right there.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about, Grandpa, because I I remember going to church with them, when we lived in Florida. I remember going to the flea markets, and the grandpa would always say, "Flea market, we don't need any fleas." And we'd be like, "Grandpa," like he would always have his little cute jokes. But other than that, I don't remember a lot about him. So we're gonna have to do an episode about Grandpa Don, because like
Yeah.
I don't remember, because we spent more time with Grandma Jane when we did the little bit of time that we did at their home in like Key West and stuff like that. And we spent more
Sure.
time doing, ceramics and painting and different things. And then Grandpa was, blowing his nose upstairs, and you could hear,
Yeah.
so I don't remember a lot about him. So I would love to do an episode about Grandpa and get you and Kim together and kind of talk about,
Yeah,
him
Kim,
a little bit.
I'm always surprised at the different things that Kim knows that I didn't know. So it would be good if we were both present.
Yeah.
I love that
Yeah,
idea.
not to derail the Grandma Jane, because I want you to keep going, but I just had to insert that because it just dawned on me. We don't talk about Grandpa Don very much, and I would love to. So
Right.
carry on
Well,
with Grandma Jane, because she was the best.
yeah, he was not the kind of person who looks for attention or publicity or anything.
Right, exactly.
Wasn't him. So he always gets the second billing.
Exactly.
So yeah, you probably knew some pretty interesting stories from Key West that I didn't know about, because I was basically never there. I was stay for a week or
Yeah,
what, and that was pretty rare too.
yeah.
So where are we going? Are we running out of time?
No. You can finish talking. I'm sorry, I totally derailed us, but I just, I felt inclined to say that because I don't want to
Sure.
lose sight of Grandpa
And
too.
we have, Jane, probably about 10 to 12 minutes or so left in this conversation, Bruce, but like you said, this is a beginning, not an ending, right? We're excited about that. So
Yes.
I love the idea, like you said, Jane, of coming back to the grandpa, but focusing right now on your
Yeah.
mom
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
continuing kind of like,
Yeah. I get you. Well, it's pretty cool because this is a type of event that never existed before,
that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember we have one picture of my mom sitting at a table, her own table in a little crummy house.
I know
That
exactly
was-
the picture.
Yeah, and she's wearing her better dress, and her table was set with everything you can think of that goes on a table. And some of it was pretty minor league stuff, but nonetheless, she had all the accoutrements, and she was sitting there, and her hair was kind of curly styled, and I remember sitting there looking at that picture, and that was what's the Marine Corps place in North Carolina where they're advertising bad water?
Oh,
Oh, geez. Yeah,
Lejeune, Camp Lejeune.
yes.
Yeah, and that's where this picture. And and I was looking at her picture, and I was thinking, here's a little girl who's like maybe 20 years old, maybe, I don't know exactly,
Wow.
and scared out of her wits. She didn't know what the hell was gonna befall her next, but she was in love with Don,
Oh,
and he wasn't there much.
yeah.
And but he trained as a pilot, and he trained as a paratrooper, and so that meant that he was being sent off to different places, not even
Oh, yeah.
not even the war times where he was sent off to the Pacific and stuff. But she just never knew what was going to come up next. Hello.
Oh, we're here.
Yeah, we're here. We're listening.
Okay. So
It was a hard time to be married to somebody in the military, right? Because there were a lot of conflicts, like you said, around the world that pulled them away. So it sounds
Right.
like, you know, she spent more time away from him
not
with
just
him.
that, he was pulled away for these different training
Yeah.
sessions. he would
Oh,
go
yeah.
to.
Yeah, absolutely. The more specialized you become.
There's weeks or months that he's gone, you know,
Yeah.
and saying, messenger Sarah to your group.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
just people putting messages in the messenger. You can ignore that for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so anyway, I was just imagining her sitting there alone
Yeah.
and possibly pregnant with Kurt.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure about that, but that's where he was born, I believe, in North Carolina. And but I can't tell you that I went by that little house that she lived in there, and it's just the rudest little hut. And it might have even been a duplex, I'm not sure,
Yeah.
but tiny wooden place on stilts, and you know, very poor lighting, and obviously bad water, and you
Yeah.
know, pretty horrible situation. But there she was, dressed up, and set the table with candles and the whole thing.
Yeah.
and,
Wow. You know what?
and
That
they're
honestly,
shitless, you know.
that Bruce, for me, like we could stop right now, and here's why. Because that is like that captures so much of the Jane, I don't know about you, but the pieces that I feel like we're hearing about, both your memories, right? And you and Dylan have both shared memories of her from when you were younger. Um, and and some of what Kim shared with us, right? But that just captures the strength that I feel like is the common thread. Like nobody's perfect. I'm not, you know, I will never have had the privilege of meeting her. And I'll tell you, Bruce, and I've said it on the podcast before, that listening to Dylan and Jane especially talk about experiences as grandchildren with your mom, that's probably the only time I've become kind of wistful in these conversations in terms of somebody who I wish I'd had the chance to know, right? My own experiences with my maternal grandmother were not pleasant. And so so that, and that common thread of the strength that she brought to the table is
Right.
that, like that image you just painted for us is really beautiful and really helps kind of tie those pieces together.
When she was young, she was always sketching and drawing, and by 1949, I guess, she decided that she was really going to be serious about her artwork, and she took lessons. We were living in Oceanside, California,
Yeah.
North San Diego County,
Yeah.
and the lady's name was Mrs. Miller, and she lived out east of Oceanside. But my mom would go out to her once a week to get her lessons for painting, I guess. And Mrs. Miller was a wonderful old person, and so point it being that from that time onward, she was a real artist,
Yeah.
and she wasn't world famous and not likely to be, but she took it seriously,
Yeah.
and she worked at it for the rest of her life.
And she influenced generations, right? Dylan and Jane both talk about those, again, those experiences as grandchildren and remembering that time with her and how influenced it was by her art, but her art.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Amazing.
When you
Really
visit
good.
Papa's house, you'll get to see he has several pieces of her art
Yeah.
at his house. And
Yeah.
that was an amazing opportunity for me.
Yeah. I bet.
Yeah.
I
I
bet.
didn't, when she passed away, I didn't try to collect a lot of her stuff because my house is so full. It's
Yeah.
just like bursting at the seams.
Yeah.
And so I bought a truck when I went down there to disperse the belongings, and I put a lot of her work, a lot of her furniture and so forth, I just gave away or
Yeah.
whatever. But her artwork I distributed on my way from Florida back to Nevada
Yeah.
to people that she knew, friends and whoever.
Yeah.
And so I ended up with a very little amount, which was okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that. That's, well, again, I just really value the insight and kind of filling out that picture a little bit more. Jane, I'm thinking this is probably a good place to wrap. I mean, it's in the middle of a story, but I feel like forever it's always going to be in the middle of a story for us, right? Like there's just so
Right.
much.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad, I have to say thank you to Bruce for doing that and going and distributing some of her artwork. Because the last time I saw her, I was 18, or no, I wasn't 18. It was at Devin's wedding, but the last time I went out to Florida to visit and see Kurt and everybody, I was 18, and she had given me this cool little like 3x5 little canvas with she just acrylic painted a little Canadian goose on it, and I have it in this larger frame because it's to me it's larger than life because it's her artwork, and it was just so fun. And but when Jason passed away, before he passed away, you stopped and gave him the bust that she made of him, and because it's just a bust of his head, and it's just beautiful, and it's when he was about 12. And when he passed away, that was the one thing that I got. It was the
Oh,
bust.
interesting.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I now have it. Yeah, and I love it to death. My daughter thinks it's creepy, but whatever. It's Uncle Jason and it doesn't matter.
He's always watching.
He's always watching. So, but you know what? It's funny. It's funny. I dress him up for the different holidays. I'll put Santa hats on him and stuff like that because, I just adore that I have that piece of artwork from Grandma. So thank you for doing that because that's the only piece that I got other than the little goose, that I got to, keep from Grandma Jane, which I adore.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you got it.
Yeah.
And that little small painting, that's just great.
Yeah, I love it. I have it. It's about this big, but I have it in a frame that's like this big and it's centered and it's just,
You'll
I
have to show
love
it.
so much.
You have to show it to us on screen.
Yeah, I actually have it in a box right now because I haven't had a good place to put it in the living room after I've rearranged it, but I'm gonna find a good spot for it and put it out again.
See it. We'll see it next time. And I'm thinking like we're gonna wrap up really quick and end the episode. You guys stick around for obviously just a couple of minutes. So let us do the quick wrap up and we'll stop the recording and then we'll come back. But what everybody Jane got to hear today was again another piece to the Doxy family puzzle, right? We added our Uncle Bruce to this conversation. And Dylan and Dina, thank you for being here. I know you're more moral support than anything else, but again, you're such an important part of the Bruce story that we'll hear more about. So I feel like I appreciate you, Bruce, for being with us for the first of what I hope will be many times, and for you sharing some of that picture and allowing us to be able to direct that a little bit so we could learn more about your mom. And we know there's so much more to learn about your story as well, but thanks to all of you for being a part. Jane, final word?
Yeah, well, you know me and bringing in the drama. So I would love to do an episode about how the 23andMe and finding out that Dina's your daughter and all of those things, how the current Bruce, handled that. And it sounds like everything's going swimmingly and it's amazing. But I would love to hear a little bit about that because just as much as Janice and I finding out that we were sisters was a shock, I'm sure it was for Dina and Dylan to find out that they were siblings as well. So
exactly,
kind of to how that all unfolded too, because it's real and it's now and it's been just as long as Janice and I have known each other. So
we'll come back to that one then. I love it.
Too. Yeah.
All right, everybody, make sure you like, share, subscribe, do all the things. And remember, we are on YouTube now, so feel free to go get a look at all of our beautiful faces and the chair from earlier, but that's a whole different story.
Yes. Yes.
thank you all for doing all the things and continuing to be committed to listening. As long as you're listening, we'll be here. So peace
Okay,
out,
is Kim
everybody.
with us today?
All right.
No, is Dylan